greatest double agent ever. Can't fucking read. Let's
Is
go.
nothing quite
June
like the
6th.
element of surprise. When the Allied forces appeared over the horizon on the morning of D-Day, it completely caught the Nazis off guard. They weren't ready for such an enormous attack, at least not here. According to German intelligence, an attack was expected to take place 150 miles away in Calais, and so most of their troops had been moved to defend that location. While the Nazis were defending an empty beach, the Allies stormed their way into Normandy and ultimately went on to win the war. The Nazis had been
He
tricked,
snapped the block
and it
on
was
the
largely thanks to one man who had spent years trolling them from his own home.
Oh.
By feeding them correct,
Yeah,
but
trolls in the
useless
Nazi war.
information,
Oh my
he led
god.
them
World
down
War
rabbit
II
holes,
trolls.
slowed them down, and ultimately tricked them
Wow.
into losing the war. This man had no spying experience, and yet with sheer charisma and imagination, he managed to win the trust of Hitler, whilst simultaneously becoming Britain's best spy. Before the outbreak
Wow.
of World War II, Spain was having its
1936.
own civil war between the Republicans and the Nationalists. No one despised the war more than Juan Puyol Garcia, a chicken farmer from Barcelona. His farm was taken by the
Barcelona.
government, his mother and sister were kidnapped, and he himself was forced to fight. He hated the
shit.
extremism of both sides, so when World War II came along, he was determined to do something to stop the Nazis. He went to the British embassy in Madrid and offered to start spying
Step on
the
those
Germans.
youths.
But
Like
the
a
Brits
real
looked suspicious
stabber.
and turned him down. And so Puyol had to come up with a different tactic. This time, he went to the German embassy, pretending to be a passionate Nazi supporter that worked for the Spanish government. At the time, the Germans didn't have a reliable spy network in Britain, and so they desperately needed all the help they could get. Puyol was hired.
Puyol, the
They
best
gave
double
him a
agent in the
code
world.
book,
Okay,
a
let's see what
bottle
he
of
do.
invisible ink, 3,000 pounds in cash, and told him to move to London and
3,000
start spying
pounds?
on the British.
I could buy 3,000 pounds divided by 20. 150 BPMs. Wow.
Instead, he moved to Portugal and simply
Wow, that's a
pretended
lot of
to be
BPMs.
reporting from London. Using nothing but a map of Britain,
Thoughts on Hebrew. I don't know what the fuck Hebrew is. I'm sorry, brother. Yo, you want to educate the man now? Let's have a fucking education class here. Oh, let's go. Let's go. Education. Do you mean Hitler? Hitler. I don't
and a
know, brother.
tourist
Me
guide
no
from his
politics.
local
I swear. I
library,
swear.
he started talking about the
frick that
places he
youth.
was visiting
Sorry, I
and
don't
the
know.
things he was seeing.
Don't
Like
shoot. I
military
swear.
training
Alright, let's go.
exercises on Lake Windermere and warships leaving the southwest. In between all of the military sightings, he filled his letters with mundane personal details, like going for walks in the center of London, visiting local cafes, and even mentioning when he was feeling ill. To take things even further, he started creating a network of sub-agents that were supposedly feeding him information
But he
from
got
all
a
over the
squad.
country.
That's what I'm talking
There was
about.
the Swiss-German businessman stationed in Liverpool,
Liverpool.
Venezuelan student in Glasgow, the Portuguese man
Glasgow.
living in Wales, and the pilot that had agreed to carry his letters from
Oh,
London. Each agent had a detailed backstory and family members that Puyol talked about at length. Of course, none of these
Yeah, get me 3 bad motherfuckers, and we'll take over our country.
people actually
That's what
existed.
he was on.
But
That's
if
what
the
he was
Germans
on.
ever called him out on anything,
So he's
his
on.
sub-agents could take the blame, since they were the ones reporting the information.
Hmm.
Each letter was so long and so detailed that the Germans started to believe him. They even started sending $500 a month to pay for his network of agents. That's $11,000 in today's money. But this was only the beginning.
$11,000.
So far, the Germans were
Wow.
impressed with Puyol's work, so they
A lot of
started
money,
asking
brother.
more
That's a lot of
specific
BPMs.
information. That's when things took an interesting turn. In his third letter, Puyol sent this report back to the Germans.
Engineer.
Convoy of
Oh,
18
I said it to her.
ships left the port of Liverpool on the 28th of March.
Convoy.
They were headed for the
Okay.
island of Malta. Although Puyol made the whole thing
tryna
up,
flip the
by
switch on 'em,
sheer
youths.
coincidence, a fleet of warships had actually left Liverpool around the same time. But before his letter ever reached the Germans, it was intercepted by Britain's intelligence agency, MI5, sending them into panic mode. A full-scale manhunt was launched to try to track down this mysterious network of spies, but unsurprisingly, they found nothing. It wasn't until they really started reading through Puyol's letters that they saw something odd. According to one of Puyol's agents, people in Glasgow will do anything for a liter of wine. This sentence gave it all away. A liter of wine? This really didn't reflect the typical Scottish drinking habits, and Britain never used the metric
Yeah,
system.
beer.
The Brits then learned that the Germans had actually wasted time and resources trying to hunt down Puyol's fake convoy of ships heading to Malta. it became clear that whoever was writing these letters, they were feeding the Nazis false information to confuse them. And it was working.
Stay blessed, yo. Stay
MI5 were
blessed.
so impressed that they tracked down Puyol and decided to turn him into a real British spy. And in April 1942, Puyol moved to
He
London
got
for real
stamped.
and was
He
given
got
the code
co-signed
name
by the
Garbo.
man them from the army.
Now, with access to real
Stamped him.
military information, he was about to take his trolling to the next level. The Allies were planning to launch a surprise attack on the north coast of Africa, where Nazi forces were gaining power.
Why?
And so,
What
over the
did
next
Africa
few
do?
months, Garbo started dropping very specific hints, suggesting that an attack was instead being planned for Norway. One of his agents saw military mountaineering drills taking place, and Canadian troops gathering in the east of
Good
Scotland.
enough.
Another agent heard rumors of Russian troops advancing westward. Without ever mentioning Norway, he gradually painted the picture that it was the likely
My guy,
target,
I'll see you tomorrow.
drawing the attention away from Africa. Hitler himself was particularly worried about this attack and ended up moving hundreds of thousands of troops to protect the Norwegian borders. Garbo's
Right.
next move was a stroke of genius. With the African invasion set to take place on the 8th of November, Garbo wrote another letter to the Germans, this time detailing exactly how the Allies were going to carry out the attack. He dated the letter the 1st of November, but purposely held onto it for another week. The letter arrived in the hands of the Germans on the 9th, but
Okay.
it was too late. The day before, the Allied forces invaded the North African coast with over 100,000 men.
Oh, he's locked the frick in. This is how you gain their trust.
The letter had all the correct details of the invasion, but it was simply too late to be of any use. The Germans, however, were amazed by Garbo's
He's moving
work
3
and
steps
replied,
ahead.
"We are sorry it arrived too late, but your last
4
report
steps.
was magnificent." Over the next several months, Garbo continued adding more members to his network, bringing the
building that team
total
up.
to 27 spies. Of course, all of these agents had to be paid, and by the end
Okay.
of 1943, the Germans were sending Garbo over $100,000 a month to fund his network. They
Damn.
were so pleased with the information that he was providing that they stopped hiring new spies in Britain. With the network now in full swing, it was time for Garbo's masterpiece, D-Day. Managing this whole operation was incredibly difficult, and it would have been a lot easier if he had Udo, today's sponsor. Ridiculously, just string that off and gives you the job. Carried out by the D-Day landings in Normandy were set to be the largest invasion ever carried out by sea, with more than 2 million soldiers from over 12 different nations, all arriving in over 100,000 vehicles. Pulling this off without the Germans suspecting a thing would be an enormous challenge, but Britain had the best man for the job.
Facts.
To avoid the information from arriving late like last time, the Germans told Garbo to start sending his messages via encrypted Morse code instead of letters.
Morse code.
Garbo would first write
Morse
his
code like
message
this. Beep, 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 beep. Okay.
in Spanish
Wow,
and
that
break
was-
up the message into clusters of 5 characters.
Clapped head. I'm
Then,
sorry.
consulting a code table, he would change each letter to jumble up the message. An operator would then start typing out the jumbled message into Morse code, which would be transmitted over radio to the Germans. With the ability to now send even more information, Garbo began sowing the seeds of doubt that would make D-Day an enormous success. One of Garbo's agents who worked in the London Underground claimed that the
Scammer
tunnels
get
were being
scammed. Come on.
extended towards the southeast and that ammunition was being moved down the tunnels. Another agent saw assault barges gathering at the port of Dover and convoys of Canadian troops arriving in Southampton. Garbo himself began
Southampton?
inventing an entire army of US soldiers and reported large numbers of them gathering in the southeast. All of this activity pointed towards a massive attack on Calais, the closest point to England. In order to back up Garbo's lies, the Brits started planting real evidence all around the southeast. Fake airstrips were cut into fields, and hollow
The
wooden planes were
fuck?
placed at the side. German planes started bombing these
They
fake
had
sites, so
inflatable
they knew it
tanks.
was working. A gigantic fake
inflatable
oil
tank?
storage facility was set up in Dover, and photos of King George visiting the site were placed in the local newspaper. Hollywood-style movie sets were used to turn modest boats into enormous
And then the
battleships,
finisher, the guy
and
tells him.
inflatable tanks were placed everywhere. They had built up an entire army of fake soldiers, vehicles
Whoa.
everywhere. They had built up an entire
That right there looks like something. How do I say it?
army of fake soldiers.
Just pointing it out, you know. Just saw it, pointing it out.
Soldiers, vehicles, and supplies that completely distracted the Germans from the real preparation that was going on for Normandy. The goal was to
Okay.
convince the Germans that even when the Normandy attacks began, the real and much larger attack would happen later in Calais. Amazingly, the British intercepted a conversation between Hitler and a Japanese ambassador, where Hitler mentioned that the first attack was going to be a decoy and that they were really preparing for the second attack elsewhere. By this point, it was clear that Garbo's messages were now landing directly on Hitler's desk, and he was believing everything. Whenever Garbo told them about movement in the southeast, the Nazis would move the pin on their map. They made the crucial decision to move hundreds of thousands of troops to defend Calais.
He really the guy with
That
the
was
hand.
hundreds of thousands of troops
puppet
that
in the
wouldn't
mouth
be in
and shit.
Normandy. June 5th, one day before D-Day. Although
June
the
5th.
German radio operators usually signed off at 11:30, Garbo insisted that tonight they should listen out for a
11.
message at 3 a.m. Big news
This was
was
7 days
expected
ago.
from one of his
150.
sub-agents.
No.
At 3 a.m., Garbo
87
reported
days.
that vomit
87?
bags and
I don't
rations
know.
had been handed out to soldiers.
Maybe.
This could only mean one
Nah,
thing.
like
The
83.
attack was about to
83.
happen. But
Bang.
hours went by and no response was received.
Bang. Got it right in the head.
Germans
83
had
years
gone to
ago.
sleep. The Allies rocked up to Normandy
5
at
days
6:30,
ago.
completely
Maybe.
undercover, outnumbering the Germans by more
Yeah.
than 3-1. It was a
Shout out to
brutal
the
day,
troops.
but the Allies managed to secure their entrance
Bro, I'm
into
not
France.
listening to this shit. Hold on. Wait.
The
I need to
Germans
lock in.
had gone to sleep. The Allies rocked up to reported that vomit bags expected from insisted that although the German radio operators usually signed off at 11:30, Garbo insisted that tonight they should listen out for a message at 3 a.m. Big news was expected from one of his sub-agents. At 3 a.m., Garbo reported that vomit bags and rations had been handed out to soldiers. This could only mean one thing. The attack was about to happen. But hours went by and no response was received. The Germans had gone to sleep. The Allies rocked up to Normandy at 6:30, completely undercover, outnumbering the Germans by more than 3-1. It was a brutal day, but the Allies managed to secure their entrance into
Smoke
France.
those youths
And
like
over
it's
the
Call
next
of
6
Duty.
weeks, continued piling troops, vehicles, and supplies in through the beaches of Normandy. Amazingly, the Nazis refused to move more troops to Normandy, and in fact, ended up sending more to defend Calais, waiting for the second attack that would never come. Every letter, every detail, every lie, and every truth had bamboozled the Germans, and it allowed the Allies to recapture Europe and win the war. Despite the defeat, Hitler was so impressed with Garbo's messages that he was awarded the Iron Cross. At the same time, Britain awarded him an OBE, making him the only person to receive war medals from both sides of the same war.
What a guy.
After the war,
What a
Guillaume
guy.
feared that the Nazis would be looking for him, and so he faked his own death and moved to Venezuela.
What a
And
guy.
just like that, he was gone.
Is he still
Amazingly,
alive?
This whole story would have never been told if it hadn't been for Nigel West, a writer from London. He was
What a guy.
determined to track Garbo down, and so he got hold of a Barcelona phone directory and called every Juan Garcia in the area. As you can imagine, there were many. Eventually, one of Garbo's nephews picked up the phone and helped him make contact with Garbo.
What a guy.
40 years had gone by, but after a lot of convincing, Garbo eventually agreed to come over to Europe, where he visited Normandy and realized just how many lives he had saved.
Jo no volia lluitar amb les armes, perquè les armes són contràries a meu. Jo vaig fer la guerra i tinc l'orgull.
Real
Ja
stapper,
vaig
this guy.
disparar sota.
Wow.
És que, baix la meva consciència no hi ha cap mort.
Thanks for watching.
Best double agent. That boy is stapper for real. For real. For real. For real.